Hi, I'm Rob Hawker, and in this video we're going to talk about managing tenant settings and specifically the new Get Tenant Settings API. So let's do this. Okay, so let's talk about tenant settings in Power BI. So tenant settings are what we use to decide which features we want our end users to see and which features we want protected and held back to a smaller group of people or just to the administrators. So a good example of this is creating workspaces. If you allow anyone in the organization to create workspaces, as this tenant currently does, then you have the risk that you've got 5 different people all building the same type of reports and they all put them in the same name workspace pretty much, but they've created 5 different versions of that workspace, which can be very confusing for your end users. So it's very common to come into this one to change this so that it's only applicable to certain security groups and therefore limit this to a smaller number of people. Now, one of the challenges with this management of tenant settings is that you quite often need to take this to governance bodies and things like that to get people to approve changes. So if I was changing some critical settings in here, so for example, turning on or off the ability to export data to Excel, I might need to take that to a board and get a decision. And to do that, I might want to be able to quickly and easily get this into a different format like Excel or PowerPoint and put rationales for what I was changing, and also to be able to put an explanation of what all of the settings do against the names of these settings. Previously, there's not been any way to get this data easily out of Power BI. It's the only way I've done it before is by using optical character recognition to actually detect text from screenshots and then put it into Excel that way. Very painful, lots of manual work required. So it's really great to have this API from Microsoft now, because it allows us to actually connect to the tenant settings, pull out the data on a regular basis, and actually put some kind of change management process into place and see when new settings actually appear from Microsoft as new features are released. Okay, so now I'm going to show you a couple of methods for how you can actually get that data. The first one, I'm going to use PowerShell. So for that, to start with, we just need to log into Power BI. So I just simply put in the login command, and Power BI will prompt me to select my account. Once I'm logged in, then I need to invoke the correct method. So I'm invoking the Power BI REST method, and I need to provide a URL and a method as parameter. So for the URL, it's just simply this from the Microsoft documentation. It's the same for every tenant. And then for the method, I just simply need to say get, because I'm trying to get data. So to do this, all I need to do then is press enter, and you can see we get lots of information from the REST API, and it's in a JSON format, and you get every single setting. If I zoom out, there's quite a bit of information there. All I need to do is take everything from that curly bracket to that curly bracket, and I personally just chose to put that into Notepad and then save a file onto my machine called tenantsettings.json. Okay, so now we're going to look at another way of getting the same information but just with a little bit more automation involved. So for this, we're in Power Automate, so we're at make.powerautomate.com, and we've created a Power Automate flow which has a few steps in it to actually download the data we want. So I have this running once a month, and using this HTTP here, we're basically connecting to the API here. Again, we're saying get, and we're connecting to the API. And under advanced options, we've got things like my tenant ID and the name of the service principal. I'll put a video link in the chat to and a link to my blog, which shows how you go about actually getting the information you need for this. And then once you've done this, Power Automate can connect to the Power BI API through here, and can actually write that data into a file in OneDrive in this case, or SharePoint if you prefer. So I've decided to put it into this Power BI videos folder. I'm going to give it a UTC now, which is the date and time that the file was run, with the word tenant settings concatenated together as the file name, and then the file content that I'm going to choose is the body that I got from the previous step from the actual API call. So once I've done that, I have my file. So here's one I ran earlier. So we actually have the file name here, sitting in exactly the folder that we wanted it to be in. So now we're going to flip over to Power BI and actually bring that data in. Okay, so now here we are in Power BI. I'm going to go to the Get Data dialog, go to More. I'm going to be looking for a JSON file. So we type in JSON and click Connect. And there's our file that we're looking to connect to. I'm going to open that. And here we are in Power Query. And we have our data from the tenant settings. So we've got the setting name. We've got the friendly title. That is the way that we see it presented in the Power BI service. We have whether it's enabled or disabled. And we have whether this particular tenant setting is allowed to have Active Directory groups associated with it. And then finally, we have the tenant setting group, not to be confused with these security groups. The tenant setting group is just the way that Power BI groups together different settings in a logical way. So when we go back to Power BI and look at the tenant settings, we can see that we have help and support settings, for example, which cover publish get help information, users can try Fabric paid features, etc. And we can see in Power BI now with our data, we've got exactly those same settings and headings: help and support settings, publish get help information. Now you may see that my tenant setting details here are missing one thing. So you can't actually see the name of the security groups where you've made a tenant setting available only to certain security groups. Now the only reason for that is this is an empty tenant that has very little in it. What I've done is created a security group and put it in just so you can see how that looks. So in this second JSON file here, we can see an extra column appears and it shows the security groups in here, and we can just expand to new rows if there are multiple security groups to a particular setting, and then we actually can see the name of the group if we go one step further down by just selecting the name of that group and adding it here. We'll get that extra column. Now, just in terms of thinking about the model here, it's probably a good practice to have one query that covers the settings without the groups and one query that covers the setting name with a group, because then you can have a one-to-many relationship between the settings themselves, which will be on the one side, and then the security groups, which could be on the many side, where you've got multiple security groups to a single tenant setting. Just one recommendation from a Power BI modeling perspective. So I hope this helped. It's just all about how to get these tenant settings out into a really usable, helpful format. My recommendations would be to run that on a monthly basis and to have Power BI connect to older versions as well as the latest version, so you can actually track easily what's changed over time. I may do some more videos on that as we go, but I think this is enough for now. Thanks very much.